Listener discretion is advised. This story contains mature themes including violence, trauma, organized crime, and adult relationships. Please consider whether this content is right for you before listening. My name is Valeria de Castillo, though the world knows me by another name now. But before I became El Shaka, before the guns and the blood and the fear that follows my shadow, I was just a little girl who loved chocolate and believed the world was good because my father told me it was. We lived in Chiapas, Mexico, in a small house that always smelled of my mother's cooking and the earth from my father's hands. Papa worked the land from sunrise to sunset, his strong hands coaxing life from the soil. We were poor in the way that people count money, but rich in the way that mattered. When Papa came home each evening, dust on his clothes and exhaustion in his bones, his face would light up when he saw me running toward him. "Mi amor," he would call me, opening his arms wide. That was his name for me, his love. And I was his favorite among all 5 of us children, though he tried to hide it. But I could see it in the way he would take me to the farm with him, teaching me to recognize which plants needed water, which soil was ready for planting. He would take me hunting too, showing me how to move quietly through the forest, how to read the signs nature left behind. "You're too kind, Mija," he would tell me, watching as I fed scraps to the stray dogs that followed us home. "This world, it's not always gentle with kind hearts. You need to learn to be stronger." But even as he said these words, I could see the pride in his eyes. He was glad I had a gentle soul, even if he worried about how the world would treat it. He worked so hard for us, saving every peso he could so we could go to school, so we could have the chances he never had. Education was his dream for us, his way of giving us a better life than the one he'd lived. I remember the day everything changed with perfect, terrible clarity. I was 6 years old, walking home from school with tears streaming down my face and blood on my lip. I had tried to walk normally to pretend nothing was wrong, but Papa saw me from far across the field. He always seemed to have eyes for me, even when he was working. The children at school had been cruel. They mocked the way I spoke, stumbling over words that felt foreign in my mouth. But what made me see red, what made me fight back despite being half their size, was when they called Papa a poor, uneducated fool. They laughed at him, at us, at the simple life that was everything to me. I couldn't let them disrespect him. So I fought. When Papa reached me, his face was a storm of emotions. Pride that I had defended him, fury that anyone had dared to hurt his little girl. He marched to the school that very day, but they wouldn't listen to a man in work clothes with dirt under his fingernails. They saw his calloused hands and humble manner, and they dismissed him. I watched it happen. At 6 years old, I saw how the world really worked, how money and status mattered more than the size of a person's heart. How good men like my father could be treated like they were nothing. The next day was worse. The boy who had tormented me brought his parents, a banker and a nurse, people with clean clothes and important jobs. Suddenly, I was the villain in the story. The principal shouted at me while they whispered about my family. The teachers warned me to stay away from their precious child. I went silent after that. What was the point of speaking when no one would listen? I told Papa I didn't want to go to school anymore, but I couldn't tell him why. How could I explain that the world had shown me its true face, and it was uglier than I had ever imagined? Mama sensed something was wrong. She kept asking questions, but I stayed silent. I was protecting them the only way I knew how, by keeping the truth locked inside my small heart. When Papa finally learned what had happened, he held me so tight I thought he might never let go. "I'm sorry, mi amor," he whispered into my hair. "You shouldn't have to see how cruel the world can be. Not yet. Not at your age." But he promised to find me a better school to make things right. That night, he took me out with some of his precious savings. We went to the store and he bought me chocolate, my favorite treat. For a few hours, I felt like his little girl again, safe in his love. We were walking home when they found us. 2 men stepped out of the shadows and my childhood ended forever. The gun looked enormous in the dim streetlight. I had never seen one before, never imagined that something so small could hold so much terror. Papa stepped in front of me immediately, his body becoming a shield between me and the danger. "Please," he said, his voice steady despite the weapon pointed at his chest. "I have very little money, but I'll give you everything I have. Just please let me and my daughter go." I pressed myself against Papa's back, feeling the warmth of him, smelling the familiar scent of earth and honest sweat that always clung to his clothes. I was frozen with fear, but I wasn't afraid for myself. I was afraid for him. The men seemed to consider his offer at first. Papa slowly reached for his wallet, pulling out the few bills he had earned that day. It wasn't much, maybe enough for groceries for the week, but it was everything to us. Then one of them looked at me. Really looked at me. And I saw something change in his eyes, something that made my stomach turn even though I didn't understand what it meant. "The girl comes with us," he said. "No." The word erupted from Papa like a prayer and a battle cry all at once. "No, please. Take everything I have, but not her. Not my daughter." What happened next plays in my mind in slow motion, even now. Papa lunged at the man holding me, his farmer's hands trying to pull me free. For a moment, I thought we might escape. Papa was strong and his love for me made him desperate. But desperation isn't bulletproof. The sound of the gunshot was louder than anything I had ever heard. Papa stumbled but didn't let go of me. There was blood on his shirt spreading like spilled paint. Still, he tried to run, tried to carry me to safety. The second shot stopped him. Papa fell to his knees, but his arms were still around me. I felt his strength leaving him, felt him getting heavier as life drained away. His eyes found mine, and in them I saw everything he had ever wanted to tell me, every dream he'd had for my future, every moment of love he'd never get to share. "I love you," he whispered. His voice was so quiet like he was falling asleep. "I love you, mi amor." Then he was gone. The man who had called me his love, who had worked his hands raw to give me a better life, who had believed in goodness despite everything the world had shown him. He was gone. One of them fired another shot just to be sure. The bullet that killed my father went through his body and grazed my leg, leaving a scar that burns even now as I tell this story. It was like the world was marking me, branding me with this moment so I could never forget. They dragged me away from Papa's body and I screamed until my voice broke. I screamed his name, I screamed for my mama, I screamed for someone, anyone, to help. But no one came. No one ever comes when you need them most. Somewhere during the journey to whatever hell they were taking me to, I stopped screaming. I stopped crying. Something inside me went cold and quiet. The gentle little girl who loved chocolate and believed in goodness died there on that street corner with her father. What woke up was something else entirely. When I regained consciousness, I was in hell. They called it a market, but it was a place where childhood went to die. Children of all ages were arranged like goods, their eyes empty or filled with the same rage I felt burning in my chest. Some were younger than me, barely old enough to walk. Others were teenagers who had probably been here for years, their faces already hard with the knowledge of what was coming. I understood immediately what this place was, even at 6 years old. We were being sold. Like cattle. Like objects. The rage that had been building inside me since Papa's death erupted. When the first buyer approached me, I attacked him with everything I had. My small fists, my nails, my teeth, I was a wild animal fighting for survival. That's when he noticed me. Gustavo Serrano, El Lobo, they called him. The Wolf. He was a plaza boss for Cartel de la Sierra, one of the most powerful men in all of Chiapas. I didn't know any of this then. All I knew was that when he looked at me, I saw recognition in his eyes. Not the kind that says I know who you are, but the kind that says I know what you are. He saw a killer in the making. "Little one," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle for a man with such dead eyes. What happened to your leg? I snarled at him like the animal I had become. I lunged at him, my small hands trying to claw at his face. His men moved to stop me, to strike me down, but he held up a hand. Let her, he said. Let her hit me. So I did. I hit him with all the fury of a child who had watched her world burn. When I finally exhausted myself, he crouched down to my level. Tell me your story, he said. And I did. I told him about Papa, about how he had begged for my life, about how they had shot him down like he was nothing. I told him about the blood and the fear and the way everything good had been ripped away from me in a single moment. Gustavo listened to every word. When I finished, he laughed, not cruelly but with something that might have been admiration. I like you, he said. You have fire. You have rage. I can see vengeance written all over your face. He paused, studying me with those cold, calculating eyes. I can free you right now. Let you go back to your family. Or... He let the word hang in the air like a promise and a threat. You can work for me. You can learn to channel that rage. You can make the people who hurt your father pay. I was 6 years old. I should have wanted to go home, should have wanted my mama's arms around me and the safety of our little house. But that little girl was dead. The thing that stood in her place wanted only one thing. I want to find the men who killed my father, I said, my voice steady despite the tears still drying on my cheeks. I want to kill them. I want to make sure no one else has to watch their papa die. Those words should never have come from a child's mouth. But they did. And Gustavo smiled when he heard them. Then come with me, little wolf, he said. Let me teach you how to hunt. If you've been liking the story so far, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Gustavo didn't raise me. He forged me. Like a blade heated in fire and hammered into shape, he broke down everything soft in me and rebuilt it into something sharp and deadly. The child who had loved fairy tales learned about real monsters instead. The girl who had cried over injured animals learned to inflict pain without flinching. The daughter who had run to her papa's arms learned that love was a weakness that could be exploited. Training began before dawn each day. Physical conditioning until my muscles screamed. Weapons training until I could field strip an assault rifle blindfolded. Combat techniques until I could kill a man twice my size with my bare hands. But the hardest lessons weren't about fighting. They were about forgetting how to feel. Emotion is the enemy, Gustavo would tell me as I stood over my first kill at age 8, a rival sicario who had been captured and beaten. Mercy is weakness. Hesitation is death. You are not a little girl anymore, Valeria. You are a weapon. I believed him. I had to believe him because the alternative was remembering the pain of losing Papa, and that hurt too much to bear. So I buried that pain deeper and deeper until it became something else entirely. Something cold and sharp that I could use. By the time I was 12, I had my first official kill. A drug dealer who had been skimming from the cartel's supply. Gustavo handed me a pistol and pointed to the kneeling man. This is what happens to thieves, he said. Make it clean. I didn't hesitate. The gunshot echoed off the warehouse walls and the man slumped forward. I felt nothing. No guilt, no satisfaction, no emotion at all. Just the quiet pride of a job well done. Good, Gustavo said, taking the gun from my steady hands. You're ready. Over the next few years, I climbed the ranks of the cartel with ruthless efficiency. By 15, I was leading my own operations. By 18, I was Gustavo's most trusted lieutenant. By 21, I was known throughout Mexico as El Shaka, the Jackal. They called me that because I was patient, strategic, and deadly. Like the scavenger that waits for the perfect moment to strike, I would study my targets for weeks, learning their patterns, their weaknesses, their fears. And then, when the time was right, I would attack with precision that left no room for escape or mercy. I was everything Gustavo had wanted me to become. A perfect killer. A living weapon. A monster wearing the face of the little girl I used to be. But monsters, I learned, are still capable of loneliness. My family wanted nothing to do with me. Mama, who had once held me close and sung lullabies, now crossed herself when she saw me coming. My siblings scattered like frightened animals when I appeared at family gatherings. They blamed me for Papa's death, and maybe they were right. Maybe if I had never been born, he would still be alive. I took care of them anyway, sending money through intermediaries, posting guards to protect them from the enemies my lifestyle had made. But I did it from the shadows, like the ghost of the daughter they had lost. The only thing that remained of my childhood was chocolate. I still loved it, still craved the sweetness that reminded me of Papa's love. It was pathetic, really, this deadly woman clinging to a child's simple pleasure. But it was all I had left of who I used to be. That, and the dreams. Dreams where Papa held me close and called me his love, where we walked through fields of corn and he taught me about growing things instead of destroying them. I would wake from these dreams with tears on my face, the only tears I allowed myself to shed. I was ready to die. At 21, I had seen and done everything. I had my revenge. The men who killed Papa were long dead, their bodies feeding the desert sand. I had power, money, respect. But I felt empty. Hollow. Like a shell of a person going through the motions of living without actually being alive. I began spending time in Merida, drawn to its beauty and tranquility. It was the opposite of everything my life had become. Peaceful, serene, untouched by the violence that followed me everywhere else. I had a house there, a sanctuary where I could pretend, sometimes, that I was someone else. It was there that I first saw her. Isla. Even her name sounded like something beautiful and unreachable. Like an island of peace in an ocean of chaos. I was sitting in a small restaurant, eating chocolate as I did every evening, my ritual of remembering Papa. The place was quiet, filled with the kind of people who had normal lives and normal problems. I liked to watch them sometimes, these civilians who worried about bills and relationships instead of bullets and betrayal. Then she walked in, and everything else disappeared. She was beautiful in a way that made my chest hurt. Not the artificial beauty of the women who hung around cartel bosses hoping to catch a rich man. This was something real, something that came from inside and made everything around her seem brighter. I stared. I couldn't help it. I had forgotten that beauty like this existed in the world. She noticed, of course. When she was leaving, she approached my table with a confidence that surprised me. "Don't you think it's weird to stare like that without saying something?" she said. Any other person who spoke to me that way would have been lucky to leave with all their teeth. But something about her made me respond instead of react. "I look at what I want to look at," I said. "And you were what I wanted to look at." She smiled then, and it was like watching the sun come up after the longest night of your life. "Oh, I see you've got a mouth on you. Do you go around saying that to every pretty girl you see?" "No," I said, and it was the truth. "Just you." We talked for a few more minutes. She mentioned that chocolate wasn't healthy, that I should eat it in moderation. When I told her I ate it not for the taste, but because it reminded me of something I had lost long ago, she asked what a beautiful, mysterious woman like me could possibly miss in life. The question hit me like a bullet to the chest. What did I miss? Everything. Innocence. Love. Hope. The feeling of being someone's daughter instead of everyone's nightmare. A life where my hands weren't stained with blood, where children didn't run from my shadow. I couldn't answer her. So I gave her my name and left. But I couldn't stop thinking about her. For a week, I stayed away from that restaurant, telling myself it was better this way. She was light and I was darkness. She was everything good about the world and I was everything wrong with it. When I finally returned, she was there waiting, like she had been coming back every day, hoping to see me again. The thought that someone might actually want to see me, might have been thinking about me the way I had been thinking about her, was almost too much to bear. "So you remembered," I said when she approached. "Remembered what?" "My name." "Of course I did. Was there any reason to forget it so soon?" "So soon." As if knowing me for 5 minutes was already something precious to her. As if I was someone worth remembering. She apologized for the question that had driven me away, said she was concerned about what could have made me react so strongly. No one had been concerned about me in 15 years. I didn't know how to process it. "I know you don't like to talk about it," she said, "but if you ever want to, I'm here. My name is Isla." Isla. Like an island. Like sanctuary. Against every instinct I had developed over the years, I found myself opening up to her. Not about the cartel, not about the killing, but about small things. Safe things. We talked and laughed, and for the first time since Papa died, I felt human. When I offered to drive her home, she accepted. She admired my car, a Cadillac that probably cost more than her family made in a year, and asked what kind of work I did. "You don't want to know," I told her. But she pressed gently. She could see I was carrying something heavy, and she wanted to help me bear it. How could I explain that the weight I carried was measured in lives taken, families destroyed, innocence lost? "I don't want you to get hurt," I told her finally. "I am dangerous. It's better this way." She went quiet then, hurt by my rejection. When we reached her house, I could see her family through the window, mother, father, siblings gathered around the dinner table, laughing and sharing their day. It was everything I had lost, everything I would never have again. "It's beautiful," I told her. "I wish my life was like that. I should have driven away then. Should have let that be the end of our story." But Isla had awakened something in me I thought was dead forever. Hope. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, someone could look at me and see more than the monster I had become. The attack came 3 days later. I was at home, relaxing for the first time in months, when I heard them moving through my house. 7 men, armed and professional. I grabbed my weapons, the Desert Eagle that had become like an extension of my hand, and my M9 backup, and moved through the shadows like the predator I had been trained to be. I took down 3 of them clean, using the darkness and my knowledge of the house's layout to my advantage. But as I engaged the others, something went wrong. A lucky shot, maybe, or a moment of distraction thinking about Isla's smile. The bullet caught me in the stomach, and suddenly I was bleeding out on my own floor. I fought my way to the car, leaving a trail of blood behind me. I should have gone to a hospital, should have called for backup, should have done any of a dozen things that might have saved my life. Instead, I drove to Isla. I don't know why. Maybe because she was the only light I had found in 15 years of darkness. Maybe because I wanted to see something beautiful one last time before I died. Maybe because I was finally ready to let someone else carry the weight I had been bearing alone for so long. I knocked on her door and collapsed the moment she opened it. "Isla," I whispered, and then everything went black. But I didn't die. Not yet. Instead, I found myself in a place between worlds, standing face to face with Papa for the first time since that terrible night when he left me. He looked exactly as I remembered him. Strong, kind, with eyes full of love for his little girl. When he saw me, he opened his arms the way he always had, and I ran to him like the child I had never stopped being in my heart. "Mi amor," he said, holding me close. "My beautiful daughter." I cried then. Cried like I hadn't since the night he died. All the tears I had swallowed, all the grief I had turned to rage, all the love I had buried beneath layers of violence and vengeance, it all poured out of me at once. I'm sorry, Papa, I sobbed. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. I'm sorry I became this thing. I'm sorry I let the world turn me into something you would hate. Hate you. Papa pulled back to look at me, his hands cupping my face the way he used to when I was small. Mija, I could never hate you. Never. You survived. You became strong. You protected our family the only way you knew how. But I became a killer, Papa. I became the same kind of person who took you away from me. Papa was quiet for a long moment, his thumbs wiping away my tears. The world hurt you, mi amor. It hurt you so badly that you had to become something else just to survive. But underneath all that armor, all that rage, you're still my little girl. You're still the child who fought bullies to defend her father's honor. You're still capable of love. How can you say that? After everything I've done? Because I've been watching over you, Papa said. I've seen how you protected our family from the shadows. I've seen how you still eat chocolate to remember our time together. And I've seen how you look at that girl who brought light back into your darkness. Isla. Even here, in this place between life and death, the thought of her made my heart race. Don't be afraid to love her, Papa said. Don't be afraid to let someone see who you really are underneath all the scars. Love isn't weakness, Mija. Love is what makes us human. But what if I hurt her? What if my world destroys her the way it destroyed me? Papa smiled then, the same gentle smile I remembered from childhood. Then protect her. Use all that strength you've built, all those skills you've learned, and protect the thing that matters most. But don't run from love because you're afraid. I ran from violence to protect you, and look what happened. Sometimes the only way to keep something safe is to fight for it. I felt myself being pulled back toward the world of the living. Papa's image was fading, but his voice remained clear. Live, mi amor. Really live. Find joy again. Find love again. Make your life mean something more than just survival. Will I see you again? Whenever you need me, Papa said. This connection we've made won't break. Just close your eyes and call for me, and I'll be there. Then I was awake, staring at the white ceiling of a hospital room. And there, sleeping in the chair beside my bed, was Isla. Isla had stayed with me for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of sitting by my bedside while I hovered between life and death, 2 weeks of not knowing if I would ever wake up, 2 weeks of waiting and hoping and praying to a God she probably wasn't even sure she believed in. When she woke up and saw my eyes open, the relief on her face was overwhelming. She called for the nurse, fussed over me, brought her family to meet me. And for a brief, shining moment I felt what it might be like to matter to someone again. But I could see the anger underneath her relief. The fear that had been building while I lay unconscious. The questions she deserved answers to. When her family left and we were alone, the storm finally broke. I'm sorry, I began, but she cut me off. Save it. I'm already plenty mad at you. I'm just glad you're recovering. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. Do you know what it's like to watch someone you care about hanging between life and death from a gunshot wound? Do you know how terrifying it is to not know if they're going to wake up? I had spent my entire adult life causing that kind of fear in other people. I had never stopped to think about what it felt like to be on the receiving end. To love someone who lived with violence, to never know if each goodbye might be the last one. Before I could respond, before I could find words to express the guilt and gratitude and love swirling in my chest, I did something I had never done before. I kissed her. It was desperate and clumsy and perfect. She tasted like hope and forgiveness and all the good things I had forgotten existed in the world. When we broke apart, she was staring at me with wide eyes, her fingers touching her lips like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened. I'm sorry I kept you in the dark, I whispered. The underworld isn't a place for people who aren't already in it. And then, because she deserved the truth, because I was tired of carrying secrets, because Papa had told me to live really live, I told her everything. I told her about the little girl who loved chocolate and believed the world was good. I told her about the night that changed everything, about Papa's blood on the street and the way his eyes went dark. I told her about the market where children were sold like cattle, about Gustavo and his cold lessons in becoming a killer. I told her about the 15 years of violence that followed, about the bodies I had left behind and the fear I carried everywhere I went. I told her about the money and the power and the emptiness that came with living a life built on other people's pain. I told her about the family that no longer wanted me, about the nights I lay awake planning my own death because I was tired of being a monster. I told her about chocolate and dreams and the way I had been slowly dying inside until she walked into that restaurant and reminded me what it felt like to be human. By the time I finished, we were both crying. Isla reached for me, pulled me close, held me like I was something precious instead of something deadly. "I'm so sorry," she whispered into my hair. "I didn't know. I didn't understand what you had been through. Now you see why I have the money to afford that car you asked about," I said, trying to lighten the mood. She laughed through her tears, and the sound was like music. Like forgiveness. Like love. "You're still beautiful," she said, cupping my face in her hands. "You're still wonderful. No matter what you had to do to survive, no matter what happened to you, you're still worth loving." "How can you say that? After everything I just told you?" "Because maybe everything happened the way it did so you'd find your way to me, and I'd find you too. Don't you think that's a little selfish?" "I guess I'm a selfish person then." I smiled for what felt like the first time in years. "I like you selfish. I like it when you want me all to yourself. Guess what? I'm selfish too, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Nobody can have you. From now on, you're mine and I'm yours." She kissed me then, slow and sweet and full of promise. It was the kiss of someone who saw all my darkness and chose to love me anyway. It was the kiss of someone brave enough to step into my world and help me find my way back to the light. When I was discharged from the hospital, I couldn't go back to my old life. The safe house in Merida was compromised, my security was blown, and somewhere out there, someone was still trying to kill me. I had a penthouse in Monterey, far from the chaos of Chiapas and the memories of Merida. It was there that I retreated to lick my wounds and figure out who wanted me dead. The list of possibilities was long. Rival cartels, dissatisfied business partners, government officials I had double-crossed, enemies of enemies in an endless chain of violence and retribution. But there was one possibility I kept coming back to, one suspicion that grew stronger the more I thought about it. Gustavo. The man who had raised me, trained me, made me into the weapon I had become. The man who was planning to overthrow the cartel from within, who had been using me to establish the connections and resources he would need for his coup. What if I had become a liability? What if he saw me not as his most trusted lieutenant, but as the only person who knew enough about his plans to bring him down? I called Isla and asked her to come stay with me. I told her I was scared not for myself but for her. The people who wanted me dead wouldn't hesitate to use her against me, to hurt her as a way of hurting me. She came without question, abandoning her life in Merida to be with me in this fortress of glass and steel overlooking the city. When I picked her up from the airport, I kissed her like I had been holding my breath and she was oxygen. "I missed you," she said, smiling against my lips. "I missed you too. More than I thought possible." That night, I took her to La Cima, an expensive restaurant where the wealthy and powerful came to see and be seen. I wanted to give her something beautiful, something normal, something that had nothing to do with the violence that defined my world. She looked stunning in the candlelight, her lips painted red, her eyes bright with happiness. I couldn't stop staring at her, couldn't believe that something so pure and beautiful had chosen to be with someone like me. But even in that moment of peace, the war was calling. "Remember that war I told you about?" I said as we walked back to the car, a cigarette burning between my fingers. "I'm done thinking about it. It's time for action." The fear that crossed Isla's face was immediate and sharp. She grabbed my hand, held it tight. "Are you going back to that life? To the killing?" "Someone is trying to kill me, Isla. In my world it's kill or be killed. I'd rather not be the latter." "Where does it end, Valeria? When do you get to stop?" "When you're dead." I understood her fear. She lived in a world of light, where problems were solved with words and compromise and time. My world was darker, simpler, more final. "You and I live in different worlds," I told her. "Your world is day and mine is night. Your world is bright and mine is dark. Your world is good and mine is evil. I have to kill because that's what keeps me alive. That's what protects the people I love." "That's not what makes you who you are," Isla said, tears in her eyes. "You're better than that. You're strong and beautiful and kind. Bad things happen to you, but that doesn't make you a bad person." She was wrong, but I loved her for believing it. She made me want to be the person she saw when she looked at me. She made me want to deserve her faith. "I understand why you have to do what you do," she said finally. "But promise me you won't be greedy. Promise me that when we're both safe, you'll come back to me." "I will," I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. "I love you, Isla." "I love you too, Valeria." That night, I left her sleeping in our bed and drove back to Chiapas, back to the world of shadows and violence I had been born into. Back to war. Gustavo was surprised to see me. Not the kind of surprise that comes from joy or relief, but the careful, calculating surprise of a predator who has been unexpectedly confronted by another predator. "How have you been?" he asked, his voice neutral, giving nothing away. "I've been better," I replied, watching his face for any tell, any sign of guilt or recognition. He was good. 15 years of training me had also taught him how I read people, how I looked for weakness and deception. But Papa had been right. I knew Gustavo better than anyone else alive. I knew his patterns, his habits, his tells. When I told him about the attack, showed him the scar from the bullet that had nearly killed me, his reaction was perfect. Just the right amount of concern, just the right tone of outrage at whoever had dared to hurt his protégé. But I had learned to read between the lines of his performances. The slight tension in his shoulders when I mentioned surviving. The way his eyes lingered on my wound, calculating whether it should have been fatal. The practiced surprise that felt just a heartbeat too late. "Any idea who might have done it?" he asked, and there it was, the question that confirmed everything. A truly innocent man would have been demanding answers, mobilizing resources, hunting down leads. Gustavo was fishing for information, trying to figure out what I knew and who I suspected. "No," I lied. "Not yet. But when I find them, I'll rip out their spine with my bare hands." He laughed then, and it was the laugh of a man who thought he was still one step ahead. "We better get to finding them then." We discussed the plan, his grand scheme to overthrow the cartel and establish a new order. I let him believe I was still his loyal lieutenant, still committed to his vision of conquest. But inside I was already preparing for war. That night I set my trap. I let it be known that I was back, that I was vulnerable, that I was alone in my apartment. And just as Papa's spirit had warned me, they came. 4 men with automatic weapons moving through my building like they owned it. But I wasn't there waiting to be killed. I was on a rooftop across the street, watching through the scope of a sniper rifle as they kicked down my door and found nothing but shadows. I killed 2 of them as they emerged, clean headshots that dropped them before they knew they were being hunted. The other 2 scattered, but I had seen enough. These weren't random assassins or rival cartel soldiers. These were Gustavo's men following Gustavo's orders. The hunt was on. But Gustavo was smarter than I had given him credit for. When his second attempt failed, when he realized I was onto him, he stopped playing games. He called in La Furia, his personal death squad of 50 elite killers. I knew them well. I had trained most of them, led them on countless missions, earned their respect and fear in equal measure. But loyalty meant nothing when weighed against survival, and Gustavo had made it clear that my continued existence was a threat to his plans. They came for me like a storm of violence and fury, but I was ready. I knew their tactics, their weaknesses, their patterns. More importantly, I knew where they gathered, where they planned, where they felt safe. I struck at their base while they were in conference, discussing strategies for my elimination. Explosives I had planted days earlier turned their sanctuary into a tomb. 50 of Mexico's most dangerous men, reduced to ash and memory in a single moment. But 15 of them had been outside when the building went up. As they came running to investigate, I was waiting with an M4 rifle that had my name El Shaka engraved on the stock. By the time the smoke cleared, 75 members of La Furia were dead, and I was once again the most wanted woman in Mexico. The cartel's response was swift and merciless. My face was on every news channel, wanted posters were plastered on every street corner, bounties were placed on my head that would make ordinary people rich beyond their dreams. The entire Mexican underworld was hunting me, and they didn't even know why. They thought I had turned traitor, that I had attacked the cartel for money or madness or some personal vendetta. They didn't know that the men I had killed were already traitors themselves, already committed to Gustavo's coup. They didn't know I was fighting to save the very organization that now wanted me dead. But Papa knew. In the space between sleeping and waking, in the realm where spirits could touch the living world, he came to me with guidance. Go to Don Alvaro, he told me. Tell him the truth. The cartel is smarter than Gustavo thinks. They will listen if you give them reason to. They'll kill me the moment they see me, I protested. No, Papa said with certainty. Not if you go to them voluntarily. Not if you have information they need. Trust me, Mija. Sometimes the only way forward is through the fire. The journey to Durango was the longest of my life. Every mile brought me closer to what might be my execution, every checkpoint was a potential trap, every shadow might hide an assassin's bullet. But I made it. I walked into the lion's den because Papa had told me to, because sometimes faith is all you have left, because the alternative was spending the rest of my life running from ghosts and lies. They captured me immediately, of course. Beat me unconscious, dragged me to a basement that smelled of fear and old blood. When I woke up, Juan Fabio was standing over me, one of Don Alvaro's inner circle, a man I knew by reputation to be both intelligent and ruthlessly pragmatic. El Shaka, he said, my alias dripping with contempt. Everyone knows that name. You're supposed to be one of the best killers alive. Surely you must be smarter than this. I have information, I said through split lips and swollen eyes. Information the Don needs to hear. Personal information according to what you told my men. Tell me about this personal matter. So I told him. About Gustavo's secret army, about the years of careful planning and patient infiltration. About the coup that was coming, the war that would tear the cartel apart from within. About how I had been used as an unwitting tool in a scheme I had never fully understood. You don't seem to be lying, Juan said when I finished. But how can I trust that you, his lieutenant, don't have some scheme of your own? Gustavo was after me to silence me so the cartel wouldn't know this, I screamed, my voice echoing off the concrete walls. He wanted to take you down from the inside out, and when he came after me and it failed and I retaliated, it fell on me and now you've taken your eyes off him. The raw desperation in my voice seemed to convince him where my words had not. He ordered them to untie me to bring me before Don Alvaro himself. The Don's compound was like something from another century, all Gothic architecture and old-world grandeur. In the garden, grapevines stretched toward the sky, heavy with fruit that would become the wine the old man loved so much. Don Alvaro was in his 60s, his hair silver but his eyes sharp as razors. He looked at me like he was trying to solve a puzzle, trying to reconcile the legend of El Shaka with the beaten, desperate woman standing before him. "So you're the famous El Shaka," he said. "You've achieved some incredible feats. Do you know that a young woman like you killed 75 of my men? I heard you've killed even more than that." "I killed no one who didn't try to kill me first," I replied. "Gustavo Serrano was trying to kill me and take over the cartel. I was his second in command for 4 years, so I know the truth. 4 years, I was establishing connections with government officials, politicians, law enforcement, creating cover businesses, mapping out new trade routes. All while blocking yours and ruining your business." The Don's expression didn't change, but I could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was adding up the pieces, seeing how they fit together into a picture he didn't like. "Gustavo wanted to destroy the cartel from the inside out and kill you to take over," I continued. "He's greedy and ungrateful. He tried to kill me because he wasn't sure of my loyalty, because he knew I would kill him if I discovered his true plan. I was only a tool until I wasn't needed anymore." I told him about La Furia, about the secret cartel Gustavo had built within his cartel, about the years of careful preparation and patient betrayal that had brought us to this moment. "Those men you think were yours were members of his personal squadron. They were hiding among you, dozens of wolves in sheep's clothing, all waiting for the signal to strike. When they came for me, I fought back. I went to their base and eliminated them before they could eliminate me. Now tell me, Don Alvaro, how am I wrong to defend myself? Who is wrong?" The Don was quiet for a long time, processing everything I had told him. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful, strategic. "What do you suggest we do now?" "Give me a team of your deadliest sicarios," I said without hesitation. "I'll strike at the heart of Gustavo's operation. I know how he thinks, how he operates. I can get close to him because he thinks I'm still his loyal weapon." Don Alvaro laughed, not with humor but with something like admiration. "You're still making a power play in this situation? Or are you serious about this?" "I am completely serious." He studied me for another long moment, then nodded. "All right. I'll give you some of the best sicarios in the cartel. Do what you will." As I left his compound with my new team, I allowed myself a small smile. Papa had been right, the truth had set me free. But more than that, I was now in the perfect position to complete my real mission. Everyone suspected Gustavo now, which meant no one was watching me. I had access to the Don, the trust of his inner circle, and a legitimate reason to move freely within the cartel's structure. The war between Gustavo and Don Alvaro would provide the perfect cover for what I really planned to do. Destroy them all. We surrounded Gustavo's compound like death itself, silent, patient, inevitable. My team of sicarios moved with professional precision, taking positions on rooftops and in shadows, creating an invisible web of crosshairs and killing angles. I took point with my sniper rifle, the same weapon I had used to kill so many others over the years. Through the scope, the world narrowed to a circle of glass and certainty. All I had to do was wait. Fate, or perhaps Papa's spirit guiding events from beyond, put Gustavo directly in my sights. He stepped onto his balcony, probably to smoke one of the expensive cigars he loved, probably thinking he was safe in his fortress of stone and steel. I didn't hesitate. The shot was clean, professional, final. Gustavo Serrano El Lobo, the wolf who had raised me and trained me and tried to kill me, dropped like a puppet with its strings cut. The man who had found me in hell and made me into a monster was dead by my hand. There should have been satisfaction in that moment, some sense of closure or justice. Instead, there was only the cold efficiency of a job completed, another name crossed off a list that seemed to grow longer every year. Don Alvaro was impressed by the clean kill, by the tactical precision of the operation. As a reward for my service, he promoted me to his inner circle, the first person ever to achieve that rank at only 21 years old. I accepted the honor with appropriate humility, knowing that it brought me exactly where I needed to be. Close enough to the center of power to strike when the moment was right. Trusted enough that no one would see the blow coming until it was too late. But I wasn't foolish enough to think I could take down the entire inner circle by myself. I needed allies, and I found them in an unlikely place, a team of mercenaries called Mano Roja, the Red Hand. They killed for money, not ideology. They had no loyalty to any cartel, no investment in the current power structure. For the right price, they would help me burn it all down. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We would strike at all the inner circle members simultaneously, eliminating them before any could warn the others or call for help. I would handle Don Alvaro personally. It seemed fitting that the final confrontation should be between us. The synchronized assassinations went flawlessly. One by one, the most powerful men in Cartel de la Sierra died in explosions, sniper attacks, poisonings. Each death looked like the work of different enemies, different motives. By the time anyone realized they were connected, it would be too late. Don Alvaro was in his garden when I came for him, enjoying his evening wine among the grapevines that were his pride and joy. He looked peaceful, content, completely unaware that his entire organization was collapsing around him. I knocked on his door as I had so many times before. Don Alvaro, I need to see you urgently. Oh, Valeria, how are you? He stopped when he saw the gun pointed at his face. My custom Desert Eagle, silver-plated with El Shaka engraved on the barrel. The weapon that had ended so many lives, now aimed at the heart of everything I had been fighting against. What's the meaning of this? He asked, his voice steady despite the proximity of death. The question opened a floodgate of emotion I had kept locked away for too long. Tears rolled down my cheeks as 15 years of rage and pain came pouring out. What's the meaning of this? I repeated, my voice breaking. Have you seen the level of crime and violence and destruction this cartel has brought to Mexico under your rule? You've destroyed countless lives, killed innocent people, broken families apart. Tell me why my father had to die, I continued, the gun trembling in my hands. Why my family had to learn to hate me. Why my life became so cold and empty. I could have been Daddy's little girl. I could have grown up normal and happy and good. But your corrupt organization took that away from me. I know you didn't do it directly, I said, wiping my eyes with my free hand. But your people did. Your system did. And because of that, I will end you and take over. I'll be the new boss of Cartel de la Sierra, and I'll fix what you've broken. I'll heal this land and restore peace. I'll change Chiapas and honor my father's memory. And when it's all finished, I'll leave this evil life behind and go back to farming and fishing like my parents did. I'll return to simplicity. Don Alvaro listened to every word, his face grave but unafraid. When I finished, he surprised me with his response. Killing me won't make you the boss, he said quietly. These people have followed me for decades. They won't automatically follow you just because you pulled a trigger. He paused, studying my face with eyes that seemed to see everything. But what I can do is make you the boss willingly. You bear a striking resemblance to my dead daughter, you know. Alejandra would have been about your age if she had lived. She was beautiful like you. From the moment I first saw you, I couldn't help but think about her. My hand wavered, confusion replacing certainty. How would you feel about becoming my daughter, Valeria? He continued. Not like Gustavo treated you, not as a weapon or a tool. As a real daughter. I would hand the organization over to you without violence, without betrayal. You wouldn't have to kill anyone else. I don't know, I stammered, thrown completely off balance. Don Alvaro moved closer, seemingly unafraid of the gun still pointed at his chest. I am sorry about what happened to your father. Julio was a good man. The words hit me like a physical blow. You knew my father? Don Alvaro smiled sadly. Of course I knew my own elder brother. The world tilted on its axis. Everything I thought I knew, everything I had believed about my mission and my purpose, crumbled in an instant. My name is Alvaro de Castillo, he said gently. Your father was Julio de Castillo, the original founder and boss of Cartel de la Sierra. I stared at the man before me, my uncle, the brother of the father I had spent 15 years avenging. The gun in my hand felt impossibly heavy, like it was made of lead and regret and shattered assumptions. That's impossible, I whispered. Papa was a farmer. He was good, he was gentle, he would never. He was all of those things, Don Alvaro said softly. But he was also the most feared sicario of his generation. Julio de Castillo was a legend before he was 30, a man who had seen and done things that would break weaker souls. He gestured for me to sit, and somehow I found myself sinking into a chair, the gun hanging loose in my grip. We came up during the brutal gang wars of the 80s, my uncle continued. It was kill or be killed, and your father was very, very good at killing. But it ate at him piece by piece, year by year. He would come to me and say, Alvaro, I'm tired of this life. When does it end? When do I get to stop being a monster? The image he was painting clashed violently with my memories of Papa, the gentle man who taught me to tend plants, who bought me chocolate, who called me his love. He founded Cartel de la Sierra with good intentions, Don Alvaro said. We weren't just another criminal organization. We protected the poor, fed the hungry, brought stability to regions the government had abandoned. Yes, we sold drugs and fought wars, but it was a necessary evil to fund the good we were trying to do. Then why did he leave? I demanded. Because he fell in love. With your mother, with the idea of being a better man, with the possibility of breaking the cycle of violence he had been trapped in since childhood. One day he came to me and said, I'm done, brother. I've shed enough blood for one lifetime. I want to raise a family and live simply and maybe, somehow, make up for the things I've done. Tears were streaming down my face now. So you let him go? How could I not? I loved my brother, and I could see that the violence was killing him inside. He made me promise to continue his work, to try to make Cartel de la Sierra into the force for good he had always envisioned it could be. Don Alvaro's voice grew heavy with sorrow. For 30 years I heard nothing from him. I prayed every night that he had found the peace he was searching for. Then, 15 years ago, I got a report about a murder on our territory. When I saw the body, he disappeared for a moment, returning with an ornate jar that made my breath catch in my throat. I couldn't stop crying, he said, placing the ashes of my father in my trembling hands. I had his body brought to me personally. I cremated him myself, said the prayers, honored him as he deserved to be honored. I fell to my knees, clutching the jar to my chest, sobbing like the broken child I had never allowed myself to be. Don Alvaro knelt beside me, putting his arms around me like the father I had lost and the uncle I had never known I had. I didn't know you were Julio's daughter until you became an inner circle member and I saw your name, he said. Castillo. It planted a seed of suspicion, but I couldn't be sure. When I threw out his name tonight and saw your reaction, I knew. Through my tears, I managed to speak. The inner circle members I killed, did you? Don Alvaro chuckled, a sound devoid of anger. I had a feeling they were planning to eliminate me eventually. You probably did me a favor. Ambitious men in this business rarely stay content with their current positions. I wanted to destroy everything, I confessed. I thought the cartel was evil, that it had taken Papa away from his family. I wanted to tear it all down and start over. Maybe that's not such a bad idea, Don Alvaro said thoughtfully. Maybe it's time for new leadership, fresh vision. Maybe it's time for Julio's daughter to finish what her father started. The revelation changed everything and nothing. I was still a killer, still had blood on my hands that would never wash clean. But now I understood the weight of legacy, the complex reality of men who did terrible things in service of a greater good. Don Alvaro took me to see my family, to reveal the truth that had been hidden for so long. Mama's reaction was explosive. She slapped him across the face and called him a liar, accused him of trying to tarnish Papa's memory with criminal associations. But when I told her my story, when she understood what I had been through and why, her anger crumbled into grief. She held me like she used to when I was small, crying for the daughter she thought she had lost and the innocence that could never be recovered. I'm sorry I treated you so badly, she whispered. I was hurting and I blamed you for something that was never your fault. Can you forgive me? There's nothing to forgive, Mama. We all did what we had to do to survive. Don Alvaro showed us pictures of Papa from his Sicario days, a young man with hard eyes and harder choices, surrounded by followers who would have died for him. It was impossible to reconcile that image with my memories of the gentle farmer who taught me to love growing things. But maybe that was the point. People aren't just one thing. They can be killers and protectors, monsters and fathers, legends and simple men who just want to tend their gardens in peace. A few days later, Don Alvaro called for a family dinner, not just my blood family but the extended family of the cartel's leadership. I brought Isla with me, wanting her to understand this new chapter of my life, this inheritance I had never asked for but couldn't walk away from. As we sat around the table sharing food and wine, Don Alvaro rose to make a toast. We gather here today in honor of my brother, Julio de Castillo, also known as El Tigre, the Tiger. He was the strongest and most principled person I have ever known. He built this organization with a vision of justice, of protection for those who couldn't protect themselves. He raised his glass toward a photograph of Papa in his prime, young, fierce, uncompromising. I tried to continue his work after he left us, but I'm an old man now, and this young generation needs young leadership. Which is why I want to announce the new head of Cartel de la Sierra, Valeria de Castillo, also known as El Shaka, my beloved niece. The room erupted in applause and approval. These hard men and women, killers and criminals and broken souls like myself, welcomed me into their ranks with genuine warmth. I promise to achieve everything my father envisioned, I said, standing with my own glass raised. To bring peace where there has been chaos, to protect those who need protection, to honor the legacy that has been passed down to me. To Julio de Castillo, I said, my voice carrying across the room. To Cartel de la Sierra, they replied in unison. Isla watched all of this with wide eyes, still processing that her lover, the woman who ate chocolate and talked softly about her dreams, was now the head of one of Mexico's most powerful criminal organizations. But she stayed. She chose to love me anyway, to stand beside me as I stepped into this new role with all its moral complexities and impossible choices. The transition wasn't easy. Taking control of an organization as large and diverse as Cartel de la Sierra required delicate maneuvering, careful alliance building, and the occasional demonstration of strength for those who might be tempted to test my resolve. There were challenges from rival cartels who saw a young woman's ascension as an opportunity for expansion. There were internal power struggles as ambitious lieutenants jockeyed for position in the new hierarchy. There were government officials who needed to be convinced that their arrangements with Don Alvaro would continue under my leadership. Each challenge required a different approach, sometimes negotiation, sometimes intimidation, sometimes the swift and brutal application of violence. I had to prove that El Shaka was more than just a reputation, that the skills I had learned under Gustavo's tutelage could be used to protect rather than simply destroy. But with each victory, each crisis navigated successfully, I felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier. Every decision I made affected thousands of people, not just my own organization, but the communities we protected, the families who depended on our support, the delicate balance of power that kept Chiapas from descending into chaos. I kept thinking about Papa, about the burden he had carried before passing it to Don Alvaro, about the cycle of violence and responsibility that had now fallen to me. How had he borne it? How had he found the strength to keep going when the moral cost became too high? The answers came to me in dreams, in the space between worlds where Papa's spirit could still reach me. Power is not about what you can destroy, he told me during one such visitation. It's about what you can build, what you can protect, what you can nurture into something better. But I'm still a killer, Papa. I still hurt people. So was I. So is everyone who takes on this responsibility. The question isn't whether you'll have to make hard choices, you will. The question is whether you'll make them in service of something greater than yourself. What if I become like Gustavo? What if the power corrupts me? Papa's spirit smiled with infinite gentleness. Then Isla will remind you who you really are. Love is the anchor that keeps us human, Mija. Don't let go of it. Balancing my new responsibilities with my relationship with Isla required constant navigation. She tried to understand, tried to accept that the woman she loved was now responsible for an empire built on violence and moral ambiguity. But I could see the strain it put on her, the way she flinched when my phone rang with reports of raids gone wrong or rival cartels making threats. "I don't want to lose you to this life," she said one night as we lay in bed, her head on my chest, listening to my heartbeat. "You won't," I promised. "When things stabilize, when I've built something sustainable, we'll step back. We'll find that peaceful life we talked about." When will that be? When will there be enough peace? When will the violence finally end? I didn't have an answer for her. In my world, there was always another threat, another challenge, another crisis that demanded immediate attention. The idea of walking away seemed like a luxury I might never be able to afford. But I was learning to compartmentalize, to create spaces in my life that were separate from the blood and business of cartel leadership. Quiet mornings with Isla where we didn't talk about territory disputes or government bribes. Evenings spent cooking together while she told me about the psychology classes she was taking online. Nights when I could pretend, for a few precious hours, that I was just a woman in love with another woman, unburdened by legacy and expectation. Don Alvaro became not just my uncle but my mentor, teaching me the subtle arts of leadership that couldn't be learned through violence alone. How to read people's motivations, how to build loyalty through respect rather than fear, how to make the hard choices that would serve the greater good even when they cost you personally. "Your father had a gift for inspiring people," he told me during one of our strategy sessions. "They didn't follow him just because they were afraid of him. They followed him because they believed in his vision of what they could accomplish together." How do I build that kind of loyalty? By being worthy of it. By making decisions that serve the organization and the community, not just your own interests. By showing that you're willing to sacrifice for something larger than yourself. I was learning, slowly and sometimes painfully, what it meant to be a leader rather than just a weapon. The skills were related but not identical. Both required the ability to make life and death decisions, but leadership demanded a longer view, a deeper understanding of consequences and connections. 6 months into my tenure as head of Cartel de la Sierra, I began implementing the changes I had envisioned during those angry, grief-stricken nights when I first dreamed of taking power. We shifted our focus from pure profit to sustainable community investment. Yes, we still moved drugs and weapons. The economics of our situation demanded it, but a larger percentage of our income went toward schools, hospitals, infrastructure projects that would benefit Chiapas for generations to come. I established strict codes of conduct for our operations. No involvement with human trafficking. No targeting of civilians. No recruitment of children. Any member who violated these rules would answer to me personally, and my reputation for swift justice preceded me wherever I went. We also began transitioning toward more legitimate businesses, construction companies, agricultural cooperatives, transportation networks that could eventually replace our dependence on illegal activities. It was a slow process requiring careful planning and patient execution, but it was a start. The other cartels initially saw these changes as weakness, an opportunity to encroach on our territory or steal our business. They learned quickly that they were mistaken. El Shaka might have evolved beyond the pure killing machine Gustavo had created, but she was still capable of decisive violence when necessary. The message spread quickly through the underworld. Cartel de la Sierra was changing, but it was not becoming weak. If anything, our new focus on community support and legitimate business was making us stronger, more embedded in the fabric of local society, harder to dislodge or defeat. Government officials found themselves dealing with a different kind of criminal organization, one that paid its bribes on time but also delivered real benefits to the communities under its protection. Police commanders discovered that crime rates in our territory were actually dropping as we provided alternatives to the desperate young men who might otherwise have turned to robbery or violence. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't pure. But it was progress. "Your father would be proud," Don Alvaro told me as we reviewed reports of decreased violence and increased economic activity in our region. This is what he always dreamed of, using our power to build something better. But even as we built something better, the weight of leadership was taking its toll. The constant decision-making, the moral compromises, the knowledge that every choice I made could mean life or death for people I would never meet. It was exhausting in ways I hadn't anticipated. I found myself eating more chocolate, not just for the memory of Papa's love, but for the simple comfort of sweetness in a life that had grown increasingly complex. I spent hours staring out at the city lights from my penthouse, wondering if I was really making things better or just finding more sophisticated ways to perpetuate the same cycles of violence and control. It was during one of these contemplative evenings that Isla finally asked the question I had been dreading. "When does this end, Valeria? When do we get to have the life you promised me?" She was standing by the window, silhouetted against the city lights, and she looked so beautiful and so sad that it made my chest ache. "I'm building something," I said, the same answer I had given her dozens of times before. "Something that will last, something that will make a real difference. But it takes time." "How much time? Another year? 5 years? 10? 20? The questions hung in the air between us like accusations. How could I explain that leadership wasn't something you could just walk away from? That the moment I stepped down, everything I had built might crumble, leaving Chiapas worse off than when I had started? "I don't know," I admitted. "I wish I could give you a timeline, but I can't. This work, it's bigger than just me now." Isla turned away from the window, and I could see tears reflecting the ambient light of the room. "I love you," she said. "I love you so much that I've been willing to accept things I never thought I could accept. I've been willing to share you with this life, with these responsibilities, with the ghosts of everyone you've had to become. But I need to know that there's an endpoint. I need to know that someday we'll just be us." "We are us," I said, reaching for her. "Right now, in this moment, we're just us." But tomorrow you'll get a call about some crisis, some threat, some opportunity that requires the immediate attention of El Shaka. And you'll go because that's who you are now. That's who you have to be. She was right, and we both knew it. The phone would ring, duty would call, and I would answer because that's what leaders do. They sacrifice their personal happiness for the greater good, their individual desires for the needs of the many. I wish things were different, I said. I wish I could be the simple woman you fell in love with in that restaurant. But that woman was already broken, already carrying so much weight that she was drowning under it. This version of me, maybe she's not perfect, but she's trying to use that brokenness for something worthwhile. Isla came to me then, let me hold her while she cried against my shoulder. I don't want to be selfish, she whispered. I don't want to ask you to choose between me and something important. But I'm scared, Valeria. I'm scared that this life will consume you completely, that one day I'll wake up and discover that the woman I love has disappeared entirely into El Shaka. That won't happen, I promised, though I wasn't entirely sure I believed it myself. You won't let it happen. You're my anchor, remember? You keep me human. What if that's not enough? What if love isn't strong enough to hold back the tide of everything else you have to be? I didn't have an answer for her. In the movies, love always wins. In real life, love has to compete with duty, legacy, survival, and the weight of thousands of other people's expectations. Sometimes love is enough. Sometimes it isn't. All I could do was hold her tighter and hope that whatever came next, we would face it together. The test came sooner than I expected, in the form of a coordinated attack by 3 rival cartels who had decided that my reforms made Cartel de la Sierra weak enough to challenge directly. They struck simultaneously at our drug labs, our legitimate businesses, and our community centers. The message was clear. They would destroy everything we had built unless I returned to the old ways of pure violence and territorial expansion. The attack killed 17 of our people, including 2 teachers at one of the schools we funded and a doctor at a clinic we had established. These weren't soldiers or criminals, they were innocents caught in the crossfire of someone else's ambition. Standing in the wreckage of the clinic, looking at the blood on walls that had been painted bright yellow to make children feel safe, I felt the familiar rage building inside me. The same cold fury that had sustained me through 15 years of killing, the same thirst for vengeance that had driven me to become El Shaka. But this time was different. This time I wasn't just angry for myself or my family. I was angry for every person who had believed in our vision of something better, every community member who had trusted us to protect them, every child who now had to learn that safety was an illusion. What do you want to do? Don Alvaro asked, his voice heavy with the weight of too many similar conversations over too many years. I want to remind them why they used to fear us, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I want to show them that evolution doesn't mean extinction. The response was swift, coordinated, and absolutely brutal. We didn't just strike back, we dismantled their entire operations piece by piece. Supply lines severed, safe houses eliminated, leadership systematically targeted until the 3 cartels who had dared to challenge us were reduced to scattered remnants begging for mercy. But I made sure the message was clear. This wasn't random violence or territorial expansion. This was justice for those who had died, protection for those who couldn't protect themselves, and a warning to anyone else who might confuse growth with weakness. The other cartels in Mexico took notice. Within a month, I had received overtures from organizations as far away as Colombia and Guatemala, seeking alliances with this new version of Cartel de la Sierra that could build schools and level cities with equal effectiveness. I accepted some of these overtures, rejected others, always calculating how each decision would serve our larger purpose. We were no longer just a criminal organization. We were becoming something closer to a shadow government, filling the gaps left by official institutions that couldn't or wouldn't serve the people who needed them most. But each expansion of our influence brought new complications, new moral compromises, new weight added to the burden I carried. I found myself making decisions that would have horrified the 6-year-old girl who just wanted her papa to come home safe. Decisions that probably would have troubled even the ruthless killer I had been under Gustavo's tutelage. The difference was that now I understood the weight of those choices. I felt every death, celebrated every life saved, agonized over every moral gray area that leadership in this world demanded. I was becoming something I had never expected to be, a woman of power who actually cared about the consequences of that power. 2 years into my leadership, Cartel de la Sierra controlled territory spanning 3 Mexican states. We employed over 10,000 people in legitimate businesses, funded 43 schools, operated 16 medical clinics, and had reduced violent crime in our regions by nearly 60%. We were also responsible for moving approximately 30% of the cocaine that flowed through Mexico into the United States, maintained private armies that could rival some national militaries, and had corrupted government officials at every level from municipal police to federal ministers. The contradictions were exhausting. I would spend my mornings reviewing reports from construction projects that would bring clean water to remote villages, then spend my afternoons authorizing shipments of drugs that would destroy lives in American cities. I would attend the graduation of students from one of our scholarship programs, then immediately drive to a meeting where we discussed the elimination of rivals who threatened our territorial expansion. Every victory came with a cost. Every moral compromise enabled some greater good. Every life saved seemed to require another life taken. Isla saw what this was doing to me. She watched me eat chocolate not just for comfort now, but compulsively, desperately, like I was trying to taste something sweet enough to wash away the bitter aftertaste of necessary evils. "You're disappearing," she said one night after I had spent 14 hours dealing with a crisis involving government investigators getting too close to our money laundering operations. "Little by little, you're disappearing into this role." "I'm the same person," I insisted, though I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. "Are you? When was the last time you laughed? Really laughed, not just smiled for political reasons or to reassure your lieutenants?" I tried to remember and couldn't. When had joy become such a foreign concept? When had everything become about calculation and consequence and the careful management of controlled violence? When was the last time you told me you loved me without your phone ringing 30 seconds later? Isla continued. When was the last time we made love without you checking your messages afterward? These weren't accusations. They were observations, delivered with the sadness of someone watching a person she loved slowly fade away. "This isn't sustainable, Valeria. You're burning yourself out from the inside, and I don't know how to help you." "You help by being here," I said, reaching for her hand. "You help by reminding me that there's still something worth fighting for beyond territory and influence and the balance sheets of violence. But what if that's not enough anymore? What if love isn't strong enough to anchor you to who you used to be?" The question haunted me for weeks afterward. Was I still the woman who had fallen in love with Isla's kindness and beauty? Was there still enough humanity left in me to deserve her devotion? Or had I become just another power-hungry cartel leader who happened to have started with better intentions? The answer came during another of my conversations with Papa's spirit, in that liminal space between sleeping and waking where the dead could speak to the living. "You're asking the wrong question, Mija," he told me as we walked through fields of memory that smelled of earth and growing things. "You're asking if you're still the same person. But people change. They have to change. The question is whether you're changing into someone worthy of the power you hold. How can I be worthy of this? How can anyone be worthy of making life and death decisions for thousands of people?" "You can't," Papa said simply. "No one is worthy of that kind of power. But some people are willing to carry it anyway to make the hard choices so others don't have to." The question isn't worthiness, it's responsibility. What if I'm becoming like them? Like the people who destroyed our family? Papa stopped walking and turned to face me, his eyes holding all the love and wisdom I remembered from childhood. The people who destroyed our family acted out of greed and cruelty and complete disregard for human life. You act out of love and responsibility and the desire to build something better. The methods might sometimes be similar, but the heart behind them is completely different. Does that matter to the people who die because of my orders? It matters to the people who live because of your protection. It matters to the children who get educated because of your schools. It matters to the families who have clean water and medical care because you chose to use your power for more than just profit. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because if Papa was wrong, if I really was becoming just another monster with better justifications, then everything I had sacrificed, my innocence, my family's acceptance, my simple dreams of love and peace, would have been for nothing. The breaking point came during what should have been a moment of triumph. We had just successfully negotiated a treaty with the Colombian cartels that would stabilize drug prices throughout the hemisphere while simultaneously funding a massive infrastructure project that would bring electricity to rural communities across 3 countries. It was exactly the kind of complex deal that proved we were more than just criminals, we were nation builders working within existing systems to create positive change. I came home to our penthouse feeling proud, accomplished, ready to share this victory with the woman I loved. Instead, I found Isla packing. "Where are you going?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Home," she said without looking up from her suitcase. "Back to my family. Back to my real life. This is your real life. We are your real life." She stopped packing then and turned to face me, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "No, Valeria. This is your real life. The meetings and the violence and the moral compromises and the weight of all those people depending on you. This is who you are now. But it's not who I can be. I need you," I said, and it came out like a prayer. "You're the only thing that keeps me human." "That's exactly the problem," Isla replied. "I can't be responsible for your humanity. That has to come from inside you, and I don't think it does anymore. I think you've given so much of yourself to this role that there's nothing left for us." She was right, and we both knew it. The woman who had fallen in love in that small restaurant in Merida felt like someone from another lifetime. The person standing in this penthouse surrounded by the trappings of power and violence, she was someone else entirely. "I love you," I said, because it was the only truth I had left. "I love you too," Isla said, closing her suitcase with finality. "That's why I have to leave. Because if I stay, I'll watch you disappear completely into El Shaka, and I can't bear to see that happen. What if I change? What if I find a way to balance this better?" Isla smiled then, sad and beautiful and completely heartbroken. "Then maybe you'll call me. Maybe you'll have figured out how to be both the leader your people need and the woman I fell in love with. But I can't wait around hoping for that to happen. I'm 25 years old, Valeria. I want to have a normal life, a normal relationship, normal problems. I want to worry about things like mortgage payments and career choices, not whether the woman I love is going to come home alive from her latest war." She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back one last time. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing important work. I think you're making a real difference in people's lives. But the cost is everything else you used to be, and I don't think you even realize it's gone." Then she was gone, and I was alone in a penthouse that suddenly felt like a prison, surrounded by all the symbols of my success and completely empty inside. I didn't cry. I couldn't cry. El Shaka didn't have time for heartbreak. There were territory disputes to resolve, government officials to manage, rival cartels to negotiate with or eliminate. The work continued, the responsibilities piled higher, and somewhere in the machinery of leadership, I lost track of the part of me that had ever believed in love. 6 months after Isla left, I stood on the balcony of a hotel in Mexico City, looking down at the city lights and thinking about how easy it would be to step over the railing. Not out of sadness, I had moved beyond sadness into something colder and more practical, but out of simple exhaustion. The treaty with the Colombians had been followed by expansion into Central America, then partnerships with European distributors, then investment opportunities in legitimate businesses across 3 continents. Cartel de la Sierra had become a multinational corporation that happened to traffic in illegal substances alongside its portfolio of construction companies, agricultural cooperatives, and technology startups. I was worth approximately $800 million. I controlled territory larger than some countries. I employed over 50,000 people across various enterprises. I was 24 years old and I felt ancient. The chocolate didn't taste like Papa's love anymore. It just tasted like sugar and cocoa and the faint bitterness of artificial sweeteners. Even my most reliable comfort had been corrupted by the weight of everything I had become. Don Alvaro found me on that balcony, which probably saved my life, though he never knew it. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, joining me at the railing. "Sleep is for people who don't have 3 governments investigating their money laundering operations and 2 rival cartels planning coordinated attacks on their supply lines." He laughed, but it was hollow. "You sound like me 20 years ago. Like your father 30 years ago. Like every person who's ever held this kind of responsibility. Did Papa ever think about jumping?" "Every day," Don Alvaro said without hesitation. "The weight of other people's lives, it's not natural for human beings to carry that much responsibility. We're not built for it." "Then why do we do it?" "Because someone has to. Because the alternative is chaos, and chaos always hurts the people who can least afford to be hurt." We stood in comfortable silence for a while, 2 people who understood the price of power in ways that couldn't be explained to outsiders. "She was right to leave," I said finally. "The girl? Isla?" I nodded. "She was right. I'm not the person she fell in love with anymore. I'm not sure I'm any kind of person at all." "You're my niece," Don Alvaro said gently. "You're your father's daughter. You're the leader of an organization that has improved more lives than most governments. You're flawed and complicated and carrying more weight than any 24-year-old should have to bear, but you're still a person." "Some days I'm not so sure." "Those are the days that matter most," he said. "The days when you question yourself, when you feel the weight of what you're doing. The day you stop feeling that weight is the day you become truly dangerous." I thought about Gustavo, about how casually he had ordered violence, how easily he had betrayed the people who trusted him. Had there been a moment when he stopped feeling the weight of his choices? A day when he woke up and realized he no longer cared about anything beyond his own power? "I miss her," I admitted. "Then call her." "And say what?" "That I've figured out how to balance love and leadership. That I've found a way to be human while making inhuman choices. That I've solved the puzzle of wanting a normal life while being responsible for thousands of people who depend on me." "Say that you're trying," Don Alvaro suggested. "Say that you're not the same person you were 6 months ago, but you're not completely lost either. Say that you love her and you're willing to work towards something better. What if it's too late? What if I've gone too far down this path to ever find my way back to who she fell in love with?" "Then at least you'll know," he said. "At least you'll have tried. The regret of not trying, that's a weight you'll carry forever." I thought about that conversation for days afterward. Weeks. The idea of calling Isla both terrified and tempted me. What would I say? How could I explain that I was still the same woman who had loved chocolate and dreamed of simple happiness, even though that woman now controlled an empire built on violence and moral compromise? The answer came from an unexpected source, a letter from one of the students in our scholarship program. A girl named Carmen who had grown up in the same kind of poverty I had known, who had used our educational funding to become a doctor, who was now working in one of our community clinics. "You don't know me," she wrote, "but you saved my life. Not just by paying for my education, but by showing me that women can be strong, can lead, can make hard choices for the right reasons. I know there are people who call you a criminal, but I call you a hero. You gave me hope when I had none, opportunity when I had none, and a future I never could have imagined." The letter was accompanied by a photograph, Carmen in her white coat, surrounded by children at the clinic, all of them smiling and healthy and alive. This was why I carried the weight. This was what made the moral compromises worthwhile. Not power for its own sake, not wealth or territory or fear, but the chance to create opportunities for people like Carmen, like the little girl I used to be before the world taught me that kindness was weakness. Maybe I couldn't go back to being the innocent woman Isla had fallen in love with. Maybe that person was gone forever, sacrificed on the altar of necessity and survival. But maybe I could become someone new, someone who carried the weight of leadership more gracefully, someone who found ways to nurture the humanity inside herself even while making inhuman choices. Maybe I could become someone worthy of love again. I'm sitting in the same restaurant in Merida where I first saw Isla, eating chocolate that still reminds me of Papa's love even though everything else in my life has changed beyond recognition. It's been 3 years since she left. 2 years since I last spoke to anyone outside of cartel business, and approximately 18 months since I stopped counting the days and started focusing on the work. Cartel de la Sierra now operates in 7 countries, employs over 100,000 people in various capacities, and has become something unprecedented in the world of organized crime, a genuinely transformative force that builds as much as it destroys. We still traffic drugs, still engage in violence when necessary, still corrupt government officials and intimidate rivals. But we also fund schools and hospitals, provide disaster relief, offer microloans to small businesses, and have created economic opportunities in regions where none existed before. I am 27 years old. I control more territory than some European nations. I have more blood on my hands than I can count, and I have also saved more lives than I can calculate. I am simultaneously one of the most wanted criminals in the Western Hemisphere and one of its most effective humanitarian leaders. The contradictions no longer exhaust me. They define me. My phone buzzes with another crisis. A rival cartel making moves against our territory in Guatemala, requiring immediate attention and probably violent response. But for the first time in months, I don't immediately answer it. Instead, I pull out another phone, one I've carried for 3 years but never had the courage to use. I dial Isla's number. It rings 3 times before she answers, her voice cautious because she doesn't recognize the number. "Hello." "Hi," I say, and my voice sounds smaller than I expected. Less like El Shaka and more like the woman I used to be. "It's me." Silence. Then, "Valeria, I know I don't have the right to call after all this time. I know you've probably moved on, built the normal life you wanted. But I needed to tell you something. I'm listening. I've learned how to carry the weight better. I still make hard choices, still do things that would horrify most people, still live in a world where violence is always an option. But I've also learned how to hold on to the parts of myself that matter. I eat chocolate because it reminds me of love, not just comfort. I dream about Papa and he tells me I'm on the right path. I fund schools because I remember what it felt like to be powerless, and I want to give other people choices I never had. Another pause. I can hear her breathing, can almost picture her in whatever normal life she's built for herself. I'm not the same person you fell in love with, I continue. That woman was broken and angry and barely holding herself together. But I'm not completely different either. I still believe in love even though I gave up on it for a while. I still believe in building something better even though the methods are complicated. I still believe that maybe, somehow, someone can love both the woman I was and the leader I've become. Where are you? Isla asks, and something in her tone makes my heart skip. Merida. At our restaurant. Our restaurant. The place where you told me chocolate wasn't healthy and I fell in love with your voice. A sound that might be laughter, might be crying. I'll be there in an hour. The line goes dead and I sit back in my chair, suddenly aware that my hands are shaking. In an hour, I'll find out if love really is strong enough to bridge the gap between who I was and who I've become. I'll discover if it's possible to be both El Shaka and Valeria, both a cartel leader and a woman capable of simple human connection. My business phone is still buzzing with that crisis in Guatemala. In a few hours, I'll have to make decisions that will affect thousands of lives, that will involve violence and moral compromise and the careful calculation of acceptable losses. I'll have to be the leader my people need, the force for change that Mexico requires, the woman who carries weight that would crush most people. But right now, for this one precious hour, I'm just someone waiting for the woman she loves to walk through a door. Someone eating chocolate and remembering what it felt like to believe in happy endings. Someone who has learned, finally, that you don't have to choose between being powerful and being human, you just have to figure out how to be both. The story isn't over. The weight isn't gone. The moral complexities that define my world haven't disappeared, and they probably never will. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't to find perfect answers, but to keep asking the right questions. Maybe love isn't about escaping the darkness, but about finding someone brave enough to stand in it with you. Maybe, just maybe, there's room in this complicated world for both El Shaka and the woman who simply wants to share chocolate with someone who makes her remember what hope feels like. I guess I'm about to find out.